Hello again, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Spilling Tea. I'm your host, Tiffany Daniels. And yes, we're going back to JD versus AH for a particular reason. I have noticed that the people who support AH, what they cling onto the most is those text messages between Johnny and Paul Bettany. I wanted to finally address that because this is a particular thing that they've used to demonize him, that they don't use to demonize females who do the same thing. Revenge fantasies is very common in those of us who have experienced abuse. I'm no stranger to them myself. We're going to learn about revenge fantasies today on this channel. And once we do, every time I see them put out those texts, I'm going to respond by sending a link to this video. Revenge fantasies are things that is common amongst all of us. I'm tired of seeing it as a means for calling him abusive. It's just another way to blame the victim. It really is. And I'm done with it. So let's talk about this. You're going to see this article linked in the description box, folks. I guess we should do with the usual disclaimers, right? Oh, we'll keep them short but sweet this time around. In the description box, you're going to see a link to this article in regards to revenge fantasies. Whenever you see those arguments wishing to victim blame JD due to text messages, please, I ask you to either respond with a link to this article in particular, or if you would like, you can use this video as well. This channel is marked not for children for a reason. We use profanity and we talk about dark subjects. If you have young children, please go ahead and use your headphones and parental supervision, obviously, if they're 16 and younger are watching this, all right? Okay. So this came out some time ago, back in 2021. It's called The Intrigue of Revenge Fantasies. Who is prone to them, what role they play, and how to effectively heal. We're going to go over the key points real quick, and then we're going to go over the article, all right? Thoughts of revenge are especially likely in individuals who have been victimized or traumatized by others, especially those with PTSD. Hi, how you doing? I got that diagnosis. Revenge serves to balance out the victim's suffering, the perpetuator's actions, regulating feelings of injustice and loss of control. Self-acceptance and self-compassion can help individuals overcome the desire for revenge. But we shouldn't be shaming these individuals for that very human response to abuse to want revenge. Okay? Let's delve into it here. The desire for revenge is a universal, personal response in all human cultures. The greater harm and transgression caused, typically the greater desire for revenge. I have a patient who was betrayed by her husband, another who was sexually assaulted by his cousin, and another that was experienced years of bullying and humiliation. They have all experienced recurrent revenge fantasies. Together we have worked through their anger, sadness, and grief. Revenge is defined as an action in response to some perceived harm or wrongdoing by another party that is determined to inflict damage, injury, discomfort, or punishment to the party judged responsible. But Robert Brisray Diner, a researcher and author on happiness, asserts to understand revenge we need to talk about embitterment, which is a feeling that often gets overlooked. Let's talk about it because it does get overlooked, folks. Embitterment is a sense of having been let down or victimized. coupled with a desire to fight back. But because the person feels helpless, it leads to fantasies of revenge or aggression. Here we see embitterment as the feeling and revenge as what is acted out due to feeling that gets evoked. Johnny is a damn sight far ahead beyond most of us because you see how those text messages end that, they never want to show. But let's get into it here. Perceptions about the desire for revenge vary according to cultures and communities. It can range from the desire to being completely taboo in expectation that there is follow through on the desire in a contemptuous manner. Many cultures currently and historically have the principle of what Knoll terms retributive functional symmetry, whereby an injustice committed by a person is then repeated with a similar injustice to that person. Current modern Western thought considers revenge taboo and encourages forgiveness instead. Revenge in childhood. That's me! Revenge fantasies often surface during childhood. Children who are prone to revenge fantasies at some point in their lives, they can want revenge against their parents. It wasn't against my parents, folks. I wanted my abuser's ass on the fire. I wanted him to feel as helpless, hopeless, and weak as he made me feel. Their fantasy play, daydreams, and dreams at night may contain schemes to get back at their parents for the frustrations that arise during childhood. These frustrations may reflect disappointment in their parents for not being able to live up to expectations or adequately protect them. According to Hayen and Weber, children use revenge fantasies to disavow their inability to act and mourn and disguise their feelings of shame. Because of their development and physical limitations and inevitable feelings of lack of control, children can assert themselves through powerful and assertive thoughts and feelings. People who are prone to revenge fantasies. Thoughts of revenge are especially likely in individuals who have been victimized and traumatized by others. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? According to one study, it also is likely to present in individuals who are diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder. Then individuals do not meet the criteria for PTSD. So any of you bitches who want to use this as a reason to exonerate Miss AH, she doesn't have PTSD. Matter of fact, I don't believe any of them actually diagnosed her with that. I could be wrong. In another study, revenge fantasies are common, but are not only specific to PTSD, complicated grief, or other stress response diagnoses. Indeed. Very interesting, is it? So what does this say? So an individual, let's take JD's situation, right? Let's break it down. This woman made it her goal in life to emasculate him, humiliate him, break him down, tear him apart, physically assault him, put him in the hospital, sucker punch him, do everything she could to make his life hell. She almost killed him twice. She refused to give him the pain meds needed to get through the most horrific part of withdrawals. I think this puts him as, I'm not a doctor. I've worked in you know my job history. I don't need to repeat it. This is more of a semi-educated guess. I'm not diagnosing either one of them, but I say that this looks like a pretty good case for what they're talking about right here. In another study, revenge fantasies are common but are not only specific to PTSD, complicated grief, or other stress response diagnoses. If y'all don't believe he was stressed during that time, really? Fucking really? Would you like me to start listing them off one by one? Because we can go there. In my article, we may be victims of trauma and not even know it. It's indicated that trauma can be defined as anything that causes our parasympathetic nervous system to react, whether it's a big T trauma, like what he went through, or little t trauma. There are various levels of trauma, and impact from trauma is relative. I've seen individuals of all levels perceive trauma, experience, and revenge fantasies. The purpose of revenge fantasies. Let's get into this. So, a particular negative interaction, such as by the way of victimization, betrayal, bullying, feeling of humiliation, anger, hurt, vulnerability, and victimhood, may be invoked. These directly impact one's self-confidence, self-belief, and self-efficacy. These experiences of humiliation and unjust hurt caused by another can understandably elicit desire to seek revenge and fantasies of revenge. Our mind perpetually tries to protect us from threat and discomfort. Noel remarks that revenge fantasies may arise as a result of attempts to protect a sense of self. There are several goals that our mind seeks by engaging in revenge. Revenge is intended to re-equilibrate the gains and losses caused by an assault. What does that sound like, folks? The losses experienced as the perpetrator not getting equilibrium, I can't talk today, but was due to them based on the harm they caused, them getting away with the act. Sounds familiar, right? With minimal or lack of consequences for their actions, or gaining power and control, which is inherent human need. Hain and Weber assert that revenge fantasies often serve to calm the negative feelings of frustration, humiliation, and insult by virtually pushing the perpetrator and settling the score between the victim's suffering and the perpetrator's actions. It also serves to regulate feelings of injustice and loss of control. To process and gain closure after feeling powerless and helpless. The powerful revenge fantasies are experienced as a mechanism to regain power and stability. Searles also sees revenge as a defensive function, one that defends against separation anxiety as well as grief. How people experience revenge fantasies. Hate toward perpetrator burns at the core of revenge fantasies, and often an array of emotions are present. So this is a common thread, folks, particularly those of us who have been abused by significant others. There's a real odd thing there. On one hand, you want to hate them. You really do. You have that hate component there, but you also have that love there, especially if you've ever been in a relationship with a narcissist. You want them to be that fantasy person that they painted themselves to be in the beginning, right? And you tell yourself that is the real them. That is the real them. And you're trying to figure out how you can go about getting the real them to come back, right? But you also hate them. You hate them for the abuse that they put you through. You hate them for the violence that they rain on your person. You hate them for the humiliation and the psychological destruction that they wreak on you. So that's what we're talking about, array of emotions here. That hate has a weird coexistence with that love. You know what I mean? You've heard about toxic codependency before. This is a thing that many people who've survived narcissistic abuse have talked about. You have that hate, but you have that love of the fantasy person that they first presented themselves as too. The thing that you fell in love with, the illusion that you fell in love with, right? The illusion. What they used to hook you. You love that. You hate the person. You hate what happens when the mask slips. You feel anger, justifiably so. Anger, hurt, pain, suffering, anger. I had a lot of rage. Still do. I work on it day to day. It's a process. These are dual with each other. Okay? Now let's get into it a little bit more. These include anger at perpetrators, fear about trusting others, despair over the harshness of the world, and a general disgust with the injustices of the world. They are typically also blended with feelings of judgment and self-loathing. God, do I know that one. I've been dealing with that one since childhood because I get taught it by me. You get taught self-loathing, folks, if you're autistic from basically the moment you get your diagnosis. It's fun, right? Over the personal vulnerability that failed to allow them to adequately protect themselves, layered with positive emotional effects which are allowing them to feel some power and strength through the fantasies. But remember, it's also dulled. You love this individual, you hate them all at once. All at once. A sense of pleasure can be gained by imagining the suffering, regaining of pride, and primal justice. It may also activate shame or guilt because of transposing thought that if I have such violent and aggressive fantasies, I must be susceptible to acting that way. Therefore, I must be a mean and out of control person. Yes, and narcissists will use this against you, basically to paint you as the abuser. Okay? They will use this, just like AH did, as a means and a way to paint you as the perpetrator when the opposite is true. And people who don't know better will buy it. But let's get into this, right? And they'll use that as a means to control you. The shame can be manifested as a sign of weakness of character. I am pathetic and weak person because I allowed that to happen to me and because I'm unable to manage my thoughts and feelings. How to effectively process and heal. One study suggests that violent revenge fantasies are not risky in the sense of inciting more aggression and rage. Thank you. Can we stop with the victim blaming bullshit now? Can we? Those were private text messages. They were revenge fantasies. They're common. Stop it. However, therapeutically, they were not the most effective option for creating greater calm and comfort. Repetitive revenge fantasies are known to increase distress. Violent graphic revenge fantasies may be arousing, frightening, and intrusive as images of the original trauma. They may also be highly frustrating since revenge can never change or compensate for the harm that was done. And when you're dealing and you're having revenge fantasies and it's in regards to a narcissist and this is coming from personal experience, there's another form of guilt. You feel guilt because you hate this person, you love this person as much as you hate them. Imagine that dichotomy thrown into the revenge fantasy. When you love that person as much as you hate them, there's that feeling of guilt that I must truly be a monster, that I would have these type of fantasies about a person I love. And it feeds into that self-loathing, right? Feeds into it. It's a part that we're not getting into here, but I wanted to talk about it to just help you folks understand. Okay? Love the illusion, and you love it deeply. So much so that you're willing to do stupid things like take a plane to England to meet a guy you never met that you met on the damn internet. Granted, I was paranoid enough to call his parents and do background research that would make most PIs proud, but ignored the red flags. Yeah, that's the level of love you have for the illusion, okay? Madly in love with the illusion this person has painted for you. Complete hatred for the things that they are doing to you. The self-loathing that you feel because you have these revenge fantasies about the person you're so madly in love with. because of the things that they are doing to you. You see where I'm going here? Yeah. According to Judith Herman in her book, Trauma and Recovery, The Aftermath of Violence from Domestic Abuse to Political Terror, people who actually commit acts of revenge, such as combat veterans who commit atrocities, do not succeed in getting rid of their post-traumatic symptoms. Rather, they seem to suffer the most severe and intractable disturbances. Because revenge fantasies are not just reactive anger, the compensatory functions of fantasies need to be explored as well. To heal effectively processed through vengeful thoughts and feelings is to work through the anxiety and the grief. This could be accomplished through integrating self-compassion and self-love strategies, as well as learning personal radical acceptance and self-compassion. These are very hard things for people who are neurodiverse to learn. I'm speaking of personal experience here. I have a great deal of compassion from everybody else but myself. It's a pretty common theme I found with the majority of us who are neurodiverse. When you are spoon-fed self-loathing from a young age, and then you put all of this on top of it, learning self-compassion, being gentle to yourself, even learning how to not necessarily take care of yourself so much as doing things that are good for yourself, can be extremely difficult to learn. My God, I'm pushing into my 40s, and I am just finally in my life getting to that point. Okay? The relevant topics to explore include harm, the pain, the injustice, and the unrelenting loss and grief. With this fully allowing the medley of emotions to surface and reconstructing a more resilient sense of self through traumatic growth. Revenge fantasies can be obsessive thoughts that can be tracked. By the way, obsessive thoughts, my ass is autistic. How many times do you think I let those revenge fantasies from my childhood reoccur? Think I didn't have them about those 2 narcissistic exes? Because I got news for you. Let's move on here. Sorry, my legs got a little cramped. People can be triggered by certain stimuli that remind them of the person or circumstances when they were subsequently offended or hurt or in a bad mood or feel fatigue. Having a plan to notice when the thoughts, feelings, or sensations arise and finding coping skills to effectively manage the recruiting thoughts and distressing feelings can be helpful and therapeutic. I'm a sensory sensitive person. These are the times when I bust out my good smelly candles and I put on some Groucho Marx, okay? Between the Marx Brothers, my metal love, and all my books, and my cat. That cat back there has done more for me therapy-wise than most of the doctors I've seen in office. I'm just gonna say. Therapy animals are amazing. Exploring values around justice, compassion, thoughtfulness, and forgiveness often get to the core of how assumed consequences would feel if they were experienced. Awareness is heightened around how it is counter to leaning into those values and being one's best self. Finally, the revenge fantasies lose their power when an individual finds alternative ways to gain a sense of power, purpose, and meaning. For example, leaving that toxic relationship. At first, when you leave a narcissistic relationship, holy fuckballs, okay? Holy fuckballs. There's a weird addictive thing there when it comes to narcissists because they do have their charm. They paint that picture so well that you become addicted to it. And when you leave that, you finally leave that, when you see the illusion for what it was, there's this weird addiction, folks. I don't know how other way to describe it. It's a weird addiction. And it takes a good moment to get over. It takes a good moment to get over. I do recommend exercise. I know, it's cliche as fuck. But I'm sorry, me doing CrossFit has helped me a great deal. A great deal. I take those aggressions out on those weights instead of on my poor psychologically already messed up mind. You know what I mean? As Buddha poignantly suggests, holding on to anger is like grasping a hot coal with the intent of throwing it at someone else. You are getting burned. The aggressiveness builds up inside with often no retribution to the person that contributed to it. The goal is to help restore a sense of stability, self-confidence, and self-love. All right, folks. So we've gotten quite a bit from this article here, right? What did we learn today about revenge fantasies? They are very common in those of us who have experienced abuse. We've also learned that we should not be using these revenge fantasies as a means and a way to victim blame people who have suffered through abuse in order to somehow make them the perpetrators. Revenge fantasies are common. They're not abuse. It is a psychological state of mind, especially when you are still stuck inside the trauma. You have to work through that anger. You have to work through that rage. And yes, it's hard. It's hard as fuck. I'm not gonna lie to you. Okay? But what we shouldn't be doing is condemning a victim for venting a revenge fantasy to his friend. Not to the person it was even about. Remember, she knew nothing of this until the case got going. Okay? Let's keep that in mind. We should not be using those texts to condemn him when this is a common thing for those of us who have suffered through horrific abuse. It's very common. And it blows my mind that we have people using that as weapons to say that he was just as bad. No, he wasn't. There is a difference between fantasy and reality, and people really need to start learning it. A fantasy is just that. It's a fiction. Never happened. It's a story. Reality is a completely different creature. She actually abused him. She actually put him in a hospital. She actually almost killed him on multiple occasions. These two things do not equal each other. Revenge fantasies should not be condemned. They should be understood. I can't hurt you if I'm having a revenge fantasy that I'm telling a completely separate person that you have no idea about. Alright? We're going to close out on that. We don't get very many views on this channel. The few that we do get do tend to get removed from time to time. So folks, please don't forget to hit the like button, hit subscribe, and don't forget to hit the comments. I do appreciate your time, and as always, we here at Spilling Tea hope you have a good one. Bye-bye.